Nobody saw the garbage truck leave Manhattan at 4:47 a.m. Not unusual. Sanitation workers are invisible to most New Yorkers. Just another truck hauling trash to the landfill. Except this truck was carrying something that could kill 8 million people in the next 4 hours. And the driver, a 51-year-old man the city thought was just another sanitation worker, was racing against a countdown only he knew existed. What happened in those 4 hours would never make the news, never earn a medal, never be acknowledged. Because the best heroes are the ones nobody ever knows saved them. Welcome to Secrets Never Told. Before we dive into this story of invisible courage and silent heroism, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from today. And if you believe true heroes work in the shadows, hit that subscribe button and help us honor those who protect us without ever asking for recognition. The alarm clock screamed at 3:30 a.m., same as it had for the past 12 years. Mike Torres reached out from under the covers and silenced it with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd been waking up before dawn his entire adult life. 51 years old, gray threading through his black hair, a body that was still strong despite the years, still capable of the physical demands of a job most people never thought about. He dressed in the dark, didn't want to wake his wife, Elena, the New York City Department of Sanitation uniform, the heavy boots, the reflective vest that would make him visible to drivers who barely saw him anyway. In the kitchen, he made coffee in the ancient machine they'd bought when they first got married, back when Mike had a different job, a different life, a different name on some classified documents he wasn't supposed to talk about. That was 20 years ago. Different world, different Mike Torres. He grabbed his lunch. Elena always packed it the night before, same routine for 12 years, and headed out to his truck. The 2015 Mack MRU garbage truck with collection number 4477 painted on the side. His route covered the Lower East Side and parts of Chinatown. 6 days a week, rain or shine, Mike Torres collected New York City's trash. Most people thought sanitation work was beneath them, dirty, undignified. Mike had heard the jokes, seen the looks, dealt with the condescension from people who thought picking up garbage was what you did when you couldn't do anything else. They had no idea, no clue that the man driving garbage truck 4477 had once defused bombs in Fallujah, Kandahar, and Baghdad, that he'd received the Bronze Star for disarming an IED while under fire, that he'd spent 15 years as an explosive ordnance disposal specialist, one of the most dangerous jobs in the United States military, that he'd walked away from it all after one too many nightmares, one too many funerals, one too many close calls that left him shaking in the dark. Elena had been his anchor. Their daughter Sophia, now 23 and in medical school, had been his reason to walk away. You can't defuse bombs forever. Eventually the odds catch up. Eventually you don't come home. So Mike Torres had become a sanitation worker. Steady paycheck, union benefits, home every night. The nightmares had faded. The shaking had stopped. Life had become predictable, safe, normal. He'd thought he left that world behind. The truck rumbled through pre-dawn Manhattan. Mike knew every street, every alley, every collection point on his route. Muscle memory guided him through the darkness. Corner of Delancey and Essex. 3 dumpsters, usually overflowing because the restaurant didn't believe in separating their trash properly. He'd filed complaints. Nothing changed. Mike hopped out, positioned the truck's hydraulic arms, lifted the first dumpster. The compactor groaned as it crushed the contents. Second dumpster. Third dumpster. Back in the truck. Next stop. Corner of East Broadway and Pike Street. Commercial area. 4 large containers. Mike went through the routine. Lift, dump, compact. Lift, dump, compact. On the third container, as it was dumping, something fell out that caught his eye. Small, metallic, unusual among the usual garbage. Mike's training kicked in before his conscious mind registered what he was seeing. That's not trash. He hit the emergency stop on the compactor, jumped out of the cab, walked around to look at what had fallen. It was a Geiger counter, old Soviet model. He recognized it immediately from his EOD training. They'd studied equipment from every country, every era. This one was from the 1980s, and it was activated. The small LED was blinking red. Mike's blood went cold. Nobody throws away an activated Geiger counter, not unless they're near something they don't want detected. His hand went to his belt. 15 years of habit reaching for equipment that wasn't there anymore. Instead, he pulled out his personal radiation detector, a small keychain device he'd carried every day since leaving the military. Most people thought it was a weird quirk. Elena called it his security blanket. Mike had never told her it was the one piece of equipment he'd kept from his old life, just in case. He activated it, held it near the container. The reading made his stomach drop. 3.7 microsieverts per hour, way above background radiation. Not immediately lethal, but high enough to indicate a significant radioactive source nearby. Mike looked at the container. Standard commercial garbage bin, but now he was seeing it differently. The weight was wrong, too heavy for regular trash. The way it sat in the truck's bed, lopsided, like something dense was concentrated on one side. He grabbed his flashlight from the cab cab and climbed into the truck bed, moving carefully around the already compacted garbage. The container had dumped most of its contents, but there was something still inside, wedged in the corner. A metal case, about 3 feet by 2 feet. Military-grade construction. Mike knew what he was looking at because he'd seen cases like this before. Lead-lined containers for transporting radioactive materials, and this one had been modified. Wires visible through a crack in the seam. A digital display duct-taped. Taped to the side. Numbers counting down in bright red LED. 3 hours and 47 minutes. Mike Torres stood in the back of his garbage truck, flashlight beam steady on the device, and felt 15 years of civilian life evaporate like morning fog. His hands weren't shaking. His breathing was controlled. The fear was there. It was always there. Any EOD tech who said they weren't afraid was either lying or insane. But it was manageable, contained. He'd seen this before. Different country, different city, same basic principle. A dirty bomb, not a nuclear explosion. Those required sophisticated triggers and weapons-grade material. This was cruder, deadlier in its own way. Conventional explosives wrapped around radioactive material. When it detonated, it would scatter that material across a massive area. Depending on the isotope and the amount, it could make entire city blocks uninhabitable for decades. In the middle of Manhattan, at rush hour, when 8 million people would be going about their day, Mike's training assessed the situation automatically. The case construction suggested significant shielding, which meant the radioactive material inside was probably very hot, high-level waste, or possibly even weapons material. The countdown timer was connected to a detonator. The wiring visible through the cracks suggested multiple redundancies. Cut the wrong wire and you'd trigger it immediately. This wasn't amateur hour. Whoever built this knew what they were doing. Standard protocol. Call it in. Get the bomb squad. Evacuate the area. Let the professionals handle it. But Mike was standing in lower Manhattan at 4:50 a.m. with a device that would detonate in less than 4 hours. The time it would take to call it in, explain the situation, get authorization to evacuate, actually evacuate millions of people, assuming they even believed him, assuming they could mobilize that fast, assuming the terrorists hadn't planned for this scenario, would burn at least 2 hours, maybe more. And there was another problem. If the bomb squad showed up, if evacuation started, if word got out that there was a dirty bomb in Manhattan, the panic alone could kill people. Stampedes, chaos, and the terrorists, because this was clearly terrorism, would know their bomb had been discovered. There might be backups, remote triggers, dead man switches. Mike thought about Elena, still sleeping in their apartment in Queens, about Sophia, studying late at her medical school apartment, about the 8 million people who would wake up in a few hours and go about their day, never knowing how close they'd come. He thought about the 247 bombs he'd successfully disarmed over 15 years, about the techniques drilled into him through thousands of hours of training, about muscle memory that never fully faded. And he thought about something one of his instructors had said during EOD school, back when Mike was 23 and thought he was invincible. Sometimes the textbook solution gets people killed. Sometimes you have to trust your training and your gut and do what nobody expects. Mike made a decision that would have gotten him court-martialed if he was still in the service. He was going to handle this himself. He climbed down from the truck bed, grabbed his phone, and did something he hadn't done in 12 years. Called a number he'd memorized but never used. A contact from his old life. Former EOD tech who'd gone on to work private sector. Specialized security consulting. The phone rang 4 times. Then a sleepy voice. "Who the hell is calling me at 5 in the morning?" Dutch. It's Mike Torres. Silence. Then, "Torres! Jesus Christ. I thought you fell off the face of the earth. You okay? I need you to tell me if there are any lead-lined storage containers at Fresh Kills Landfill, the old section, and I need you to tell me in the next 60 seconds without asking why." Dutch didn't ask why. That was the thing about former EOD techs. You learned not to waste time with unnecessary questions. "Yeah, south section, near the old Marine transfer station. There's a bunch of construction debris from hospital renovations. Lead sheets, lead-lined boxes for old x-ray equipment. Why? Actually, don't tell me. You need anything else?" "No, thanks, Dutch." "Mike, be careful with whatever you're doing." "Always am." He hung up, got back in his truck, entered a new destination into his GPS. Fresh Kills Landfill, Staten Island. 45 minutes away, maybe 30 if he ignored every traffic law in New York City. The truck rumbled west toward the Manhattan Bridge. At this hour, traffic was light. Mike pushed the accelerator harder than he should have. The heavy vehicle wasn't built for speed, but it could move when necessary. He thought through the problem systematically. The bomb needed to be isolated, moved away from populated areas. It needed additional shielding to contain the radiation if it detonated. And it needed to be disarmed, which meant Mike needed time and space to work. Fresh Kills was perfect. The former landfill on Staten Island had been closed and done since 2001, converted into parkland. But there were still sections that were essentially giant garbage mountains covered in soil, remote, isolated. And if Dutch was right, there was lead shielding available. The Manhattan Bridge passed beneath the truck's wheels. Brooklyn before dawn looked almost peaceful. Mike kept his speed steady, his hands relaxed on the wheel. Inside his head, he was already working through the disarmament procedure. He'd need to see the device more clearly, identify the explosive type, trace the detonator wiring, determine if there were anti-tamper mechanisms. It had been 12 years since he'd done this, but some skills you never forget. They're written into your nervous system, coded into muscle memory, burned into your brain through repetition and adrenaline, and the absolute necessity of getting it right. Because in EOD work, you don't get second chances. The Belt Parkway stretched out ahead. Mike checked the timer again through his rearview mirror. The device was still visible in the back, its LED counting down in the pre-dawn darkness. 3 hours and 12 minutes. He pressed the accelerator a little harder. Fresh Kills landfill sprawled across 2,200 acres of Staten Island. Once the world's largest landfill, now a strange landscape of grassy hills that were actually mountains of garbage covered in topsoil. Mike had read about the transformation. City's attempt at environmental redemption. Most of it was closed to the public, still undergoing conversion. Perfect for what Mike needed to do. He drove through the northern entrance. The gates were closed, but not locked. Just a chain he could snap with the truck's weight. The sanitation department had access to these areas for maintenance. Nobody would question a garbage truck being here. The truck bounced over rough ground as Mike navigated toward the old marine transfer station. Dawn was breaking now, the sky shifting from black to deep blue. He could see the silhouettes of the garbage mountains against the horizon. He found the construction debris exactly where Dutch said it would be. Piles of material from hospital renovations, old equipment, lead sheets, demolished walls that had contained radiation shielding. Mike jumped out and searched through it, finding what he needed within minutes. A lead-lined container, about 4 feet by 3 feet, used to transport radioactive medical waste. Heavy as hell, but intact. Perfect. Using the truck's hydraulic lift, Mike positioned the lead container on the ground. Then he carefully, very carefully, used the lift to extract the bomb case from his truck bed. The device weighed maybe 80 pounds. Mike's radiation detector screamed as he moved it, the levels spiking to dangerous readings. He worked quickly but methodically, got the bomb case positioned inside the lead container. The radiation readings dropped immediately. Not gone, but contained. Manageable. Now for the hard part. Mike checked the timer. 2 hours, 47 minutes, and 15 seconds. He grabbed his toolbox from the truck. Basic equipment, but it would have to do. In the old days, he'd had specialized tools, sophisticated equipment, backup teams. Now he had a screwdriver set, wire cutters, and 15 years of experience. Mike knelt beside the device and really looked at it for the first time in decent light. The construction was professional. The case was sealed with industrial epoxy and mechanical bolts. The timer was a commercial digital model, but it had been modified. He could see additional wiring, redundancy circuits. The detonator access panel was on top, held in place with security screws. He pulled out his tools and started working. The security screws came out easily. Standard size, no special requirements. That was interesting. Most professional bomb makers used custom fasteners to slow down disarmament. Maybe this was overconfidence, or maybe time constraints. Mike lifted the access panel. Inside was a nightmare. The explosive was C4, military grade, about 10 pounds of it, enough to scatter radioactive material across several city blocks. The detonator was an electric blasting cap connected to the timer through a maze of wires, at least 15 separate connections, color-coded but deliberately confusing, multiple batteries for redundancy, and something else, a mercury switch, anti-tamper device. Move the case too much and the mercury would complete a circuit, triggering immediate detonation. That's why the terrorists had thrown it in a dumpster. They'd known it would be handled, moved, tossed around with other garbage. The mercury switch meant that even if someone discovered it, any attempt to safely transport it would trigger the bomb. Except Mike hadn't moved it much. The garbage truck's hydraulic lift had kept it relatively stable. Pure luck. He stared at the device, his mind racing through possibilities. The mercury switch was the immediate threat. He needed to neutralize it before doing anything else, but it was connected to the main detonator circuit. Disturb it, and the whole thing could go. 2:33:22. Mike took a breath. Remember remembered his training, the voice of his first instructor. When you're looking at a device, don't see what the bomb maker wants you to see. See what they're trying to hide. He studied the wiring more carefully. The mercury switch was prominently placed, obvious, threatening. But there, almost hidden behind it, was something else. A small circuit board with a radio receiver, a remote trigger. The mercury switch was a decoy. The real threat was that someone, somewhere, could detonate this device remotely at any moment. The timer was just for backup, insurance in case the remote signal failed. Mike's hands moved quickly. He traced the remote receiver's wiring, following it back to the main detonator. There, a junction point where the receiver, the timer, and the blasting cap all connected. If he could isolate that junction, cut the right wires in the right order, he could disable both the remote trigger and the timer simultaneously. But the wiring was deliberately confusing. Colors that didn't follow standard conventions. Paths that looped back on themselves. This would take time. Time he didn't have. 2 hours, 19 minutes, and 47 seconds, Mike forced himself to slow down. Rushing got you killed. He pulled out his phone and took pictures of the wiring from multiple angles. Then he started tracing each wire systematically, following its path from source to destination, building a mental map of the circuit. Red wire from the battery to the timer. Blue wire from the timer to the junction. Yellow wire from the junction to the detonator. But also, green wire from the battery to the remote receiver. White wire from the receiver to the junction. And black wire, ground, connecting everything. The junction was the key. If he cut the wires feeding into it in the right sequence, he could starve the detonator of power before it could fire. But the sequence mattered. Cut the wrong wire first and you'd complete an alternative circuit, triggering the bomb. Mike closed his eyes and visualized the circuit, saw it like a three-dimensional map in his mind, traced each possible path for the electrical current, eliminated the safe cuts, identified the dangerous ones. He opened his eyes. Cut the green wire first. That would disable the remote trigger without affecting anything else. Then cut the blue wire. Timer disconnected. Finally, cut the yellow wire. Detonator isolated. His hand was steady as he positioned the wire cutters on the green wire. This was the moment. If he was wrong, if he'd misread the circuit, if there was something he'd missed, he'd have about 3 milliseconds to realize his mistake before the blast. Mike Torres thought about Elena, about Sophia, about 8 million people who would never know his name. He squeezed the cutters. The green wire parted with a soft click. Nothing happened. Mike exhaled slowly, one down. He positioned the cutters on the blue wire. This one was trickier. It was bundled with other wires, positioned in a tight space. He had to be careful not to accidentally cut the black ground wire at the same time. The cutters closed. Click. The timer display flickered, then went dark. 014733 frozen on the screen. Dead. Powerless. 2 down. The yellow wire was last. This one connected directly to the blasting cap. Even disconnected from its power sources, there might be residual charge in the circuit. He needed to cut it quickly, cleanly, no hesitation. Mike positioned the cutters, squeezed. Click. The device went completely dead. No lights, no sound. Just inert explosive and radioactive material. Still dangerous, but no longer armed. Mike sat back on his heels and looked at what he'd just done. He disarmed a dirty bomb in the back of a garbage truck at a Staten Island landfill using a screwdriver set and wire cutters. His hands started shaking. Adrenaline finally catching up. He let them shake. That was healthy. That was normal. The shaking meant he was still alive to shake. He checked his watch. 6:34 a.m. The whole thing had taken about 90 minutes from the moment he'd found the device. Felt like hours. Felt like seconds. Mike carefully closed the lead container. The radiation would still be there. You couldn't disarm radioactive material, only contain it. But it wasn't going to be scattered across Manhattan anymore. He pulled out his phone and called a different number. A federal agent he'd worked with years ago on a joint task force. Someone who would understand what he was about to say without asking too many questions. The phone rang twice. "This is Agent Morrison. Morrison, this is Mike Torres. I worked with you on the Baghdad Embassy detail in 2009. Pause. Torres, what can I do for you? I'm at Fresh Kills Landfill on Staten Island. I have a disarmed dirty bomb in a lead container. You're going to want to send a recovery team, quietly. And you're going to want to check surveillance footage on the Lower East Side, specifically the corner of East Broadway and Pike Street. That's where it was placed." Longer pause. "Torres, are you telling me you just..." "I'm telling you there's a device that needs to be recovered. Radioactive material, military-grade explosive, professionally constructed. I've neutralized the trigger mechanisms, but the material is still hot. You'll need hazmat and a bomb squad. And Morrison, if you could keep my name out of the report, I'd appreciate it." "Jesus Christ, Torres. Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Just doing what needed to be done. Stay where you are. Team will be there in 20 minutes. Mike hung up. He walked back to his truck, started the engine, and sat there for a moment in the dawn light. He thought about what he'd just prevented. 8 million people going about their day. Elena making breakfast. Sophia studying for her exam. None of them knowing how close they'd come. That was okay. That was how it should be. The recovery team arrived 18 minutes later. FBI, hazmat, bomb squad, all descending on fresh kills like a controlled hurricane. Morrison himself showed up, looking at Mike with an expression that was equal parts disbelief and respect. "You should have called it in," Morrison said. "Probably," Mike agreed. "You could have been killed." "Yeah, why didn't you call it in?" Mike looked at the agent. "Because in the time it would have taken to evacuate Manhattan, that thing would have gone off. Because there was a remote trigger that could have been activated at any moment. And because," he paused, "because sometimes the person in the right place at the right time has to be the one who acts." Morrison studied him. "You know I have to file a report." "I know. And you know your name is going to be in it." "I figured. And you know you're probably going to get in trouble for not following protocol." Mike smiled slightly. "I drive a garbage truck, Agent Morrison. What are they going to do? Demote me?" Morrison laughed despite himself. "Fair point." He became serious again. "For what it's worth, Torres, you saved a lot of lives today." "Thank you." Mike nodded. He watched the recovery team carefully extract the lead container, load it onto a specialized transport vehicle. Professional, efficient. This was their job now. His job was done. He drove his garbage truck back to Manhattan as the sun came up over New York City. The morning rush hour was starting. People flooding into the city for work, for school, for life. None of them knew. None of them would ever know. Mike finished his route, collected the rest of his designated garbage. By 2 p.m., he was done, same as always. He drove back to the depot, parked his truck, filled out his paperwork. His supervisor stopped him on the way out. "Torres, you okay? You look tired." "Long morning," Mike said. "Yeah, well, get some rest. Same route tomorrow." "Same route tomorrow," Mike agreed. He went home. Elena was in the kitchen making dinner. "Hey, honey, how was your day?" "Quiet," Mike said. "Just the usual." "Good." Sophia called. She aced her pharmacology exam. "That's great." They ate dinner, watched some TV, went to bed at 10. Normal, safe, peaceful. As Mike was falling asleep, Elena said, "You're still carrying that radiation detector, aren't you?" "Yeah," Mike admitted. "I used to think it was paranoid. Now I think maybe you just know things I don't." Mike was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes experience teaches you to be careful. Were you ever going to tell me what you really did in the military?" "It's not a secret. I was EOD." "I know what the letters stand for. I'm asking what it meant." Mike thought about the bomb in the garbage container, about the timer counting down, about the decision to act rather than wait. "It meant," he said carefully, "that sometimes you have to make hard choices with incomplete information and live with the consequences." Elena was quiet. Then she took his hand. "I'm glad you came home every night. I'm glad you kept coming home." "Me too." 3 days later, Mike was collecting trash on his regular route when he saw it. Just a small news item on the bottom of page 7 in the New York Post. FBI foils terrorist plot. Details classified. No specifics, no names, no explanation of what had been foiled or how. Exactly how it should be. Mike Torres drove his garbage truck through the streets of Manhattan, invisible to the millions of people around him, and felt at peace. Because the best heroes are the ones nobody knows saved them. The ones who act without recognition, without glory, without thanks. The ones who simply do what needs to be done because they're the person in the right place, with the right skills, at the right time. And then go back to their regular life as if nothing happened. Have you ever wondered about the people you pass every day? The ones in uniforms you don't notice? Doing jobs you don't think about? What if they're carrying skills, experiences, and stories you can't imagine? Share your thoughts in the comments below. At Secrets Never Told, we believe the greatest heroes are often the ones hiding in plain sight, protecting us, saving us, watching over us without ever asking for acknowledgement. Until next time, remember that protection often comes from unexpected places, and the person collecting your trash might just be the one standing between you and disaster.